Good morning, everybody. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Logan Rathbone, and I am a Family Law Committee co-chair, and this is Laura Oliver. And I've been a sole practitioner in the areas of family law with an emphasis on child protection as well as criminal law since 2011. And would you like to do a brief introduction of yourself, Laura, since we'll be jointly presenting the committee report for family law?
Alrighty, I'm also from Halton. I have been practicing family law exclusively for, I hate to say this, 25 years.
All right. So as somebody who is newer on board at FOLA, it's an honor and a privilege to be here this morning. Now, in speaking with the stakeholders, I would suggest that three overarching issues keep coming up time and time again, particularly in the era of COVID and I guess what one might call post-COVID, which is access to justice, delay, and inconsistency. And I think that in the items that Laura and I discussed today, you'll notice that these themes are sort of a common element and keep coming up again and again. Now, we have broken down our report into some more specific ongoing issues. So I'll start by discussing the area of technology and the consistency and expectations that kind of go along with that. You did hear Katie talk about case lines, but we've got the whole interactivity, right, between portal, the e-filing portal. God help us all, the e-filing portal. And we've got how does that interact with case lines? Why are the portal submissions not automatically going to case lines? There's been a lot of discussion and complaining and whatnot about that. And then, of course, as an added layer, we've got the email filing. There are some situations, depending, again, it's all jurisdiction dependent, and where you can't always utilize the e-filing system. You need to use an email address, and which email address do you need to use? So again, it comes down to consistency or really lack thereof in a lot of situations. Case lines versus non-case lines. Again, jurisdiction dependent, but also we're seeing within jurisdictions, one level of court will often be utilizing case lines. The other level of court will not be, and sometimes it depends on which judge is overseeing the matter that you're dealing with. And so there's been a lot of question marks about how this has all been going thus far and how it will evolve in the future. On the technology side, hyperlinking has become a huge thing, and bookmarking. And what we're finding, among other things, is that not all hyperlinks are created equal. You can sometimes create a document that is hyperlinked beautifully, but then once it gets to case lines, all of a sudden your hyperlinks fall apart. And so, again, I think a lot of what this comes down to is we lawyers are in a profession that is not exactly traditionally known to be particularly tech savvy. And so really, we're all being asked quite quickly, really, to adopt and adapt so many new and unfamiliar technologies, and how we go about actually stick handling that has been a bit of an ongoing issue, a lot of an ongoing issue. On the subject of case lines specifically, I want to completely echo Katie's remarks. Watch and rewatch Lorna Yates' presentation on case lines, which is available on the FOLA YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and punch in FOLA, you'll see the channel come right up, and you can just click on that. It's absolutely an invaluable resource, and as Katie indicated, it is our #1 viewed video on the FOLA YouTube channel. Sorry, Joe. Moving along to filing and processes surrounding filing, delay, huge issue. And not only delays themselves, but consistency and inconsistency surrounding those delays. So these issues can crop up again. Within a jurisdiction, there can be inconsistency surrounding the delay when one submits family law items for filing. And also, we're speaking with a lot of the stakeholders. We're seeing that in some jurisdictions, it's not a problem. And then in other jurisdictions, it's a huge problem. and the portal says, well, within 5 business days, you're going to be sure to get a confirmation as to whether your documents have been successfully filed or not. And sometimes we're finding that that's not always taking place, among other things. And this is particularly frustrating, I would suggest, for those of you who, like myself, have sort of spread their wings a little bit in the post-COVID era, where with virtual hearings, it's so much easier to say, well, I'm a Halton practitioner, but if I get a call from, for example, Niagara, which has taken place a few times, because of virtual hearings, it can be easy just to pick up that file and run with it. But the problem is, if changes come down the pike with respect to how the filing processes work, and also how the virtual attendances work, and if those can get converted to in-person, that can cause things to break down. But I'm getting a little off the subject of filing, talking about that, but it is important. And rejections and how those are working. Again, I think that I would suggest that in the e-filing era, things have not been working the same way as in the old days in terms of rejections. In the old days, if you went up to the counter and a document was rejected, the clerk would tell you right on the spot what the problem was, and you could often resolve it right then and there. But with e-filing, things don't work that way. And so...
And your stuff can get rejected, but you don't get the refund on your credit card for 30 or 45 days.
Absolutely. And so those are some of the hot button issues on my topics that we've encountered. Now Laura will be providing some further comments.
I'm going to talk about sort of a couple of the bigger picture issues, but my one Welland story for Ashley's benefit, my one Welland file had 2 mommies and 3 daddies for 1 child. So it was a fun file. So a couple of topics that I want to talk about, the expansion of the family court. So obviously this is something that we all think is a great idea. Way back when I was president of the Halton County Law Association and was coming to FOLA, we were very active. We did a position paper supporting the expansion of the Unified Family Court, and unfortunately at that time it didn't go anywhere. It's a very, very political issue. It's a very complex issue because you have to deal with federal pensions and provincial pensions and federal judges and provincial judges and who pays what. So we were approached by the OB and they've indicated that they're supporting the initiative in this year on a go-forward basis, and they wanted to know if FOLA would support it as well. And my initial reaction at the time was, I'd like to speak to the senior family judge to see if that's on her radar, because if it's not, then I don't really want to go down the path if it's not going to go anywhere. Kathy Baticki from the OBA indicated she had a great discussion with Doug Downey last night, and he is on board with pushing forward. So I think it is a great initiative for us to get behind again, and we'll keep you posted on that. One thing that I know that the senior family judge is very much in favor of is the expansion of the DRO project. So I believe the applications are open right now. If you contact your local librarian, they can get you to the site where you can submit your applications. It's kind of a pain to submit your application, but if you're interested in becoming a DRO, it's certainly worthwhile, and they certainly do a lot to assist with the administration of justice in family law matters. In Milton in particular, we assist with last-minute pre-trials and get a lot of matters off the trial list, which means the local judges very much appreciate it, which helps then with your local reputation. And I know that the MIPS are back up and running again. I just saw that last week with a client, so those will now start to become an issue again. I don't know, they're virtual right now, they're not in person. I don't know if they'll stay virtual, that seems to make sense. And then we've also been approached by let me make sure I get this right, the Federation of Law Societies, which promotes the development of national standards in practice, to address whether or not family law should be a delineated and defined core competency. This is in law schools all across the country, as well as in the equivalency examinations. So when you look at their national requirement, it was last updated in January of 2018. And so at that point, it said to get called to the bar, you must satisfy certain competency requirements. And one is either a law degree in Canada or a certificate of accreditation from the National Committee. And then it goes on to list various competencies that you should have acquired in one of those two streams. And so there's common law and equity, statutory interpretation, administrative law, constitutional law, criminal law, contract law, tort law, property law, and not family law. So we will be putting together a submission to support family law being part of the core competencies. I've asked the Law Society to generate some statistics in terms of how many practitioners across the province report X percentage of their practice is dedicated to family law. So we will keep you updated on that. If there's any information that you want us to, you think it's important for us to delay, either reach out to Katie and she can get it to us, or reach out to Logan and I directly. And then as well, Logan, on the other issues you raised, any suggestions on what we do next?
Well, there have been a number of suggestions about how to do that. I think that receiving some further input from our constituents would be helpful, because it is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution, but having FOLA prepare a letter, for example, to the assistant AG was an option that was suggested, and that's being taken under advisement. Did you have any other?
So as in my role as regional rep, at our last meeting, we decided that I would approach our regional senior justice to say, hey, can we get a judge and a staff person from all of the courts in our region, as well as some lawyers, and have either a CLE or a Q&A to make sure that we're all on the same page with respect to this technology. And Justice Ricchetti wrote back and said, hey, I think that's a great idea. So that's something that we can expand on as well. Yep, Kathy?
Can we include OCJ in that?
Yeah, I think we should, yeah.
So Regional Senior Justice Curry on this potential list.
I think that's us.
Okay, thank you very much. So who's next on the agenda?
That would be me. Hello, good morning. Mark Giavedoni, I'm the chair of the Real Estate Committee. The first thing, I guess, is that I'm not Eldon, and I'm not Meredith. Since the last plenary, there's been a change, and so I welcome the position wholeheartedly. I would like to just break the report down in a couple of segments. One is just with respect to update blasts, consultations, and then regulatory issues. Real estate is always in a state of flux in terms of how practice works. Probably about 80% of what's going on is real estate focused. The other 20% is more generally related to solicitor practice. So anything that falls within that umbrella is something that I'm eager to talk about or deal with. We try and get about an email update on real estate issues every 2 months or so, or depending on when something major or catastrophic tends to happen. It's almost like a telephone tree, so we try to reach out to the identified real estate reps in each of your associations. If you can keep that current, that's wonderful. I think the presidents also tend to get that, but it's intended to trickle down so that once your real estate reps get it, it can funnel down to your members. And it seems to be working. It could work a little bit better, but it is starting to work quite nicely. We get updates regularly from the Director of Titles, his lot from the DOT, which is a segue into how we practice, particularly in matters of conveyancing. That's not often really readily accessible through government channels or websites, although it's buried. The lot from the dot updates are posted through TerraView, and we try and get those blasts out to our members the same way. We also update on increases in costs. So there's usually an annual update on costs, but we also have surprises like we saw from Unity in terms of a 300% increase in software costs. Surprise, and trying to get that information out to try and manage it. In terms of consultations and responses to either government or regulatory changes, we try to be on top of those. You will have seen some commentary in relation to the federal government's legislation that was passed in June. It should come into effect January 1st, prohibiting sales of residential property to non-Canadians. The consultation period was over before it began, and we still submitted something to the federal ministers in any event, asking them to at least try and maybe not implement the legislation, or at least give a sober second thought to what it actually means, because it essentially is provincial jurisdiction. It has way too many open-ended questions in terms of how it will impact lawyers in practice, because coincidentally, government is probably not going to go and chase down the non-Canadian that bought the real property. They're going to go after the lawyer that helped facilitate the deal. So we have some work to do on that. There have been a slew of regulatory, statutory changes and consultations, some relating to the New Home Industry Act, Tarion changes, warranty changes, and what we have all seen with respect to affordable homes and making that, that process faster. We're mindful about what we actually will respond to. All of these are game changers. They will change the landscape. It's not entirely clear automatically what that means for practicing lawyers. So to the extent that there are updates that help our lawyers navigate these, we can make that available. In terms of responding to consultations, we may not address all of the topics to weigh in on whether it's good or bad, unless it actually has an impact on how we practice in our communities. So we are looking at responses that are geared towards that angle, as opposed to commenting on the legislation itself, just whether it's good or not. There is one federal legislation that looks like it could be sneaking in. Any of you who manage condominiums for builders, when you're holding trust funds for deposits, the government is looking to wedge in there and require reports to the federal government about who you're holding the funds for, how much, what are their SIN numbers, what is that all about? And they're not clawing out that situation. So it's not that it's a target to lawyers' trust accounts, but it's swept up in the legislation. So we are looking at what that means and how that could be a no-fly zone, essentially, for how lawyers practicing in that area could be impacted. We did provide a commentary on the changes to the Planning Act that came into force earlier this year, and so we have some resources with respect to that. From a regulatory standpoint, we are engaging with the Law Society in a number of matters. One is with respect to the recent change that was to remove the allowance for virtual ID attestation. So in January 2022, the Law Society changed its rules to mirror the larger rules from the Federation of Law Societies. That came into effect in January of this year, but because of COVID, we were able to verify ID of our clients virtually. Well, that practice will stop as of January 1st. And we are trying to ask the Law Society to delay that so that we can get more information on what this is going to mean for the way that we practice. It is a game changer. The problem is I don't think much of us have had an opportunity to actually sit down and digest how that's going to change our practices after we have just changed all of our practices. So we do need to have a more fulsome discussion about that. There will be a conversation about succession planning. That consultation period ends at the end of this month. And the ongoing conversation about discharges of mortgages and the flow of funds. The last guidance that we have is from 1993. The world has changed since then. So we are working with the Law Society and some other groups on how we can implement those changes more readily. And Venture election's coming up, so real estate lawyers should be running. So just a plug there. So I'll turn it to you, Terry.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Katie's coming up to help me because I have to admit that, like my longstanding FOLA friend, Queen Ashley Gibson over there, I am technologically challenged. I have to admit that, like my friend, I needed my student during these pandemic days not only to teach me how to turn the laptop on, but I had to move it from where I thought it was a doorstop. And that's a true story. Because this smartphone is what I use. I am so old, like my friend down there who didn't want to admit she's 25 years out. I'm coming up on 29 this February. And I used to use the old dictaphone with tapes, and I kept a lot of secretaries going. And this thing's fabulous. I talk to it, the words pop up, and that's it. But then when you do your legal aid report, it's not on proper letterhead. It's, I've sent PDFs to Katie, and she said, why'd you send that as a PDF? I'm like, what's a PDF? So I just want to say thank you very much to Kelly Lovell at the back and to Katie Robinette for helping me technologically. That takes me to my report. I do hope that if you practice in the legal aid area, that you go and read the report. Please and thank you. And remember, it was dictated on here. To start out today, I want to comprehend how many people in this room are criminal law legal aid certificate practitioners, any portion of your practice. Let's just see the hands around the room. Thank you. Now put those down for a minute. Family law, any portion of your practice, legal aid certificate work, thank you. So there are a lot of us in this room. Immigration, refugee work, legal aid certificate work, anybody? Typical FOLA, there we go. And anybody on the clinic side, there's an underrepresented area for legal aid here. Anybody on the clinic side, legal aid clinic lawyers here, we've had them in the past, sometimes from the universities, nobody. Okay, so everybody who has legal aid certificate work again, please put your hands up, everybody who had your hand up earlier. Look around the room. That's a large portion of this room. And Katie and I, we hear from you, but we don't hear from enough of you, and we don't hear from enough of your membership who are behind you in your associations. This is a very serious topic. You know what I know, and that is you have not seen a tariff increase, a pay increase, in over 7 years. Like Ken Marley said to me at dinner last night, look at the price of gasoline. Was it 300% you said, Ken? 300%. Your gasoline cost in your vehicle has gone up. Look at everything else. Look at the cost of absolutely everything. Your overhead, your utilities. You're not paying your staff what you did over 7 years ago. And if you are, shame on you. Obviously, your staff are getting paid better. And that leads me, thanks to Katie's help, to my presentation, which I thought was called a slide presentation, but it's called something else, PowerPoint. Okay, so Katie and I have a little PowerPoint here. 2019, the provincial government budget cut from Legal Aid Ontario, $130 million lost. Next slide. 2019-2020, $90 million transfer from the Law Society Ontario Law Foundation to legal aid equaled 20% of the total legal aid operating revenue. 2020, 2021, 30 million transferred, Law Society, Ontario Law Foundation, representing a $60 million decrease in 1 year. 2021, 2022, we all know and we've all grumbled and we've all spoke about it. The provincial government transfer $50 million to sustain legal aid. 2022, the provincial government committed $72 million to Crown and Court operations for new hires. 2022, legal aid has not increased, as I said already to you, the hourly tariff nor the block fee funding model for your private bar certificate lawyers in over 7 years. Next slide. Thank you. This is the big point that I was getting to you at the beginning. For the Federation of Ontario Law Associations to be truly the voice of the practicing lawyer, we need to know your experiences. You are out there. You are practicing. You have examples. And if you don't share those examples, we can't use those when we're lobbying the government at both levels, when we're talking to Doug Downey, when we're meeting with others, when we're trying to be your voice. If we don't know some of these situational circumstances that you have vis-a-vis your clients and your service of the client and access to justice issues and all the like, the self-represented situations, and why legal aid needs funding for sustainability. If you don't go back to your boards and invite people to reach out and communicate with Katie and I, then we cannot properly be your voice. And this is problematic. And I'm saying it and I'm stressing it this way because I'm obviously passionate. I've been doing legal aid certificate work throughout my entire career. The clientele cannot afford lawyers and they need representation. I've often thought, I'm so fed up with legal aid, maybe I'll stop taking legal aid, like a lot of the family law practitioners have successfully done. But the problem in criminal defense work is the people who really need you genuinely cannot afford to borrow money to finance a lawyer in any way. And it's not about financing. It's about, again, sustainability of the system overall. If you look at the amount of money and savings for the government for each dollar placed into legal aid, it is significant. But time and time again, Katie and I have spent hours on the Alliance for Sustainability for Legal Aid. We have spent hours lobbying. We have written letters. And we're, as you know, we're not seeing any results. And we need your help. And this is right here. And every single plenary at the end, I've said, reach out to Katie, reach out to me, tell us, communicate, so that we can be stronger in our representation of you. And time again, for whatever reason, people do not provide us with your voice, so we can speak for you. Please, I strongly encourage you, because should we come back in 3 years and say, we're now 10 years out and there's been no increase? And lawyers, we're type A personality people, the barristers I'm talking about. I'm not trying to exclude anyone. And we're going to continue our job because we are officers of the court. We have a duty, we have a responsibility. We're not going to shirk that. We're going to live up to our professional standards for the Law Society of Ontario, despite the lack of ability to properly finance the work that we need to do. So we're going to keep doing it, aren't we? There's the problem. Thank you for hearing me.